What is up, YouTube? This is T-Quentin1 coming at you with another video, and yeah, there were just too many good episodes of this show. For those of you who don't know, I'm a huge fan of the Twilight Zone. I've loved most of the episodes, and while the last video still stands as my personal favorites, after combing through the series yet again, I thought it would be a good idea to pick out 5 more absolute must-see highlights. Now again, I love this show, and I just wanted to show it some more attention. But first, here's a few more honorable mentions. Will the Real Martian Please Stand Up? Living Doll, The New Exhibit, The Howling Man, Nick of Time, and of course the only episode to make me cry, Night of the Meek. So with that out of the way, let's get into the actual list, starting with number 5, and that is Where Is Everybody? This was the very first episode of the show, and I think it's safe to say it's what got everyone hooked. The concept here is pretty simple, and to be honest, not that original. A guy has no memory of who he is, and he can't ask anybody because he seems to be the only person around. What works really well in this episode is the main character. If you're going to be stuck with a single person the whole time, it has to be someone likable, and he really is. On top of that, you feel the isolation, and it's kind of uncomfortable. In fact, it's very uncomfortable. And while the ending isn't as mind-blowing a twist as some of the other episodes, it was the first episode, and it does fit. So, this was awesome. Number 4, The After Hours. I just think it's a really scary idea to be trapped in a huge store alone at night. I don't know, that just creeps me out, and this episode takes full advantage of that. Again, it's a fairly simple premise, but the execution is just awesome. From the very beginning, you could tell something is off here. The way these people talk, the mysterious 13th floor that's totally abandoned except for one item, all of it adds to the creepy atmosphere. On top of that, Anne Francis is great as the lead. I think it's important for any Twilight Zone episode to keep the main character grounded, and both Francis and the writers do a great job in that regard. My only problem, and I know I'm in the minority here, is I really didn't like the ending that much. That being said, the rest of the episode still more than makes up for it, and it's definitely worth a watch. Number 3, Perchance to Dream. This is one of the least remembered episodes, and by far one of the most underrated. This episode is about a guy with a heart condition whose nightmares may actually kill him. I think the highlight here is the surreal way this episode is filmed. Just from an aesthetic standpoint, it's one of the more demented episodes I've seen, and it just builds and builds, with each scene being crazier than the last, and by the end, everything just explodes. I also think all the actors do a really good job, and this has to be one of the most interesting casts of any episode. All the characters are fascinating. The main guy, like his past, is so interesting, and even characters like the psychiatrist, or the highlight, of course, Maya the cat girl. So, all in all, Perchance to Dream is a fascinating episode with great atmosphere, and it's really well performed. Number 2, The Midnight Sun. I think the reason this episode is so great, or at least one of the reasons it is the theme it explores. And it's a really disturbing theme. How would humanity react if we had nothing to do but wait for death? See, the world got knocked off its axis in this episode, and so for a couple of months it has been hurtling toward the sun. Now we watch humanity's final days from the point of view of 2 women in an apartment building before everyone burns up. Yeah, pretty bleak, right? And that's what makes this episode so fascinating. As I said, all anybody can do is wait to die. How do you deal with that? The main 2 characters are also sympathetic and feel very real. I like that the main chick is a painter. It just adds this thing of how would you pass the time if you knew you were going to burn up and die? The dialogue in this episode is also great, my favorite line being, "Don't paint the sun anymore." And Lois Nettleton gives one of my personal favorite performances on this show. So, The Midnight Sun is an episode that has gotten its fair share of appreciation, but it just really wowed me when I rewatched it. And number 1, The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. Now, the last episode was bleak, but this is probably the darkest episode of the show, and it might just leave the most impact after watching. Really, the only out of the ordinary thing going on here is the power goes out. There's no monsters, no crazy paranormal stuff. The horror here comes from regular people turning on each other. The way it's filmed, the music, the atmosphere, the cast especially, because they all do a great job at making these people feel real, but it is terrifying to watch them tear this neighborhood apart. And the episode, like Perchance to Dream, just keeps building and building, and it's honestly, to me, terrifying to see this happen, partially because of how it's not all that unlikely for something like this to occur. When bad things happen, everybody looks for someone to blame it on, and that, I don't want to get too, I guess, political, but that is very relevant today. And those last lines by Rod Serling are just chilling. So The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street is one of the best episodes and one of the most important, I think. So that was my list. If you agree or disagree, comment below. Let me know. This is T Quentin 1 signing out.